Welcome to the 10 Years Out podcast. I'm your host, Sam, and it is my 10 years out. That is how long I have been out. I identify as queer, and my pronouns are she, her. And today I have a new friend with me, Nancy Shadlock. Hi, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Happy to be here.
All right, so preliminary questions. What are your pronouns? How do you identify? And how long have you been out?
My pronouns are she, her. Sometimes I play with they. Today we'll use she, her.
Okay.
And I identify as queer. And I've been out. You made me have to get my fingers out and count earlier. I think it's 8 years. So I'm
Nice.
hot on your tail. 10
Okay,
years.
good. I hope you're celebrating it every year.
I should, yeah. And I will make a point of doing that. It's November, so I'll do
Okay.
that.
Yep. It can be Thanksgiving, it can be queer Thanksgiving.
There we go.
All right. And what do we need to know about who you are and your story before we talk about what you've learned since coming out?
Um, I was raised very evangelical Christian, professional Christian. I like to say my parents were missionaries, so I grew up in Kenya for part of the
Ah,
time.
MK.
Yeah, so yeah, that was like a big part of my growing up and a big part of what kept me in the closet until I was 33.
Yep.
And I went through and got my master's, a Master of Arts in spiritual formation and help people pay attention to where the divine is showing up in their lives. And um, was very involved in my church in Vancouver and on the board and leading worship and doing all the things. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of the context that my coming out came out of. So I don't know how far into that to go without your other questions, but
When you came out at 33, had you realized like long before that you weren't straight?
yeah, my first inkling came in about grade 5 or 6. I remember watching the news and seeing this kid getting bullied at school because he was gay, and I was like, what if that happens to me? And I kind of like had this moment of panic, and then I was like, that's weird. Why would you think that? Like, and kind of pushed it down, even though I was quite tomboyish growing up. Um, but I just kind of kept pushing it down, and then it kind of reared up again in grade 12. I was reading Philip Yancey's book, What's So Amazing About Grace.
Okay.
And in there's a chapter on this pastor named Mel White, and
Oh
he
yeah.
was coming out and lost his whole family and his job as a pastor and all these things. And I was like gripped with this fear. And I was like, what if that happens to me? Because at that point, I already knew I wanted to be in kind of ministry of some sort,
Okay.
but I had no idea that there you could have a path of coming out and authentically being in ministry or something. And so I just like I was gripped with fear. I actually wrote Philip Yancey and
Yeah.
he wrote me back. It was amazing.
Did you come out to him? Like,
Well, I said I read this and I got really scared and I think I might be gay.
mm,
And he wrote me and said, like, thank you for sharing this. Is there anyone in your community right there that you could talk to
mm,
about this? I was like, good answer, but that's the harder thing to do, Philip.
right.
So I did dare to talk to my youth pastor about it,
Yeah.
and she basically said, like, this and this and this are the scriptures that say it's wrong, so we'll just pray it away. And I did.
And that
Kept
was the
kept
path that you
having,
went down
yeah,
till you were 33.
yeah.
What
And then
happened
by
at
that,
33?
well, at that point, I'd been part of this very progressive church in Vancouver, Canada, that um had been wrestling through the scriptures of like about if it's okay to be gay and if that was maybe mistranslated and different things. And so I started to look at it in a different way. And like I was scared to read them. I was scared to read the things that said, actually, it's okay to be gay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, what? I don't know if that's allowed, and I don't know if I can live that. But there was also some, elder gays in the church that I could look up to and see that they were, these two women living a beautiful life together and serving in the church and being, respected. And I was like, oh, that's different. Okay, this
Mm-hmm.
is possible. So it gave me like some windows of possibility. And then I built a tiny house and I couldn't find anywhere in Vancouver to park it. And so I started asking people in Calgary, where I grew up, which Calgary is um, kind of like Texas of the North,
Okay.
and um, so quite conservative and but lots of space. And
Okay.
so space was fine. So right away, someone was like, "Yeah, park your tiny house here." So I moved to Calgary, which is like a 12-hour drive away. And there was something about being anonymous and in this new
Oh.
world that helped me feel like, okay, maybe I can explore this a bit more. And, by that time I had this master's, and my master's, I had done a practicum in spiritual direction, which is like
Mm.
one-on-one supportive listening with people. And so I was like, if I'm going to sit and listen with people to the divine in their lives, I can't be like pushing this one side of myself away. And so it's like I really have to look at this and live authentically who I am
Mm-hmm.
so that I can, do my practice authentically. And um, it was super scary because I was like, I'm going to lose all of my clients because they're all from the church
Mm-hmm.
basically. And if they believe that if I live my gay life, I'm not listening to God, then they're not going to respect me to come and help them hear from God or different things. And so that was super scary, but kind of between the anonymity of living in a new space. And then I went to a friend's wedding in Mexico, and she was marrying a woman. And there was this moment at the all inclusive. These guys came in, they're like, "How many lesbians are there at this lesbian wedding?" And someone was like, "Oh, I guess." And so the guys started going around the circle. They went to our friend, and she's an Anglican priest, and she's got long brown hair, and they're like, "No." She's like, "Yeah, actually, my girlfriend's waiting for me back home." And they go to our friend who's got short blonde hair. She's a hairdresser, and they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah." And she's like, "No, my husband and kids are waiting for me back home." And
I
they're like,
love this game.
and then they come to me, and I'm like panicking. I'm like, "What are they gonna say?" And they were like, "I don't know." And I blurted out, "I don't know either." It was this moment of like confession. And like from then on, it was like out in the world in the ethers that I was wondering about this. And kind of from then on, I really like looked at it and realized like I have my motorcycle license and I would like to ride motorcycles more often, but I don't because I'm scared people will think I'm a dyke.
Oh.
And I want to have a funky asymmetrical haircut, but
Mm.
I don't because people might think I'm a lesbian. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like realized there was all these ways that I was living small, even though I like professed to live this big, grand life. And
Right.
usually in most areas of my life, I don't let anything stop me. But in this one area, I was like very confined. And so I realized it was time I had to come out of the closet.
Yeah, because once you even opened that lid, I mean, it would release everything. It would release the haircut. It would release the motorcycle riding. It would release all of the freedom that you were trying so hard to
Mhm.
keep in.
Yeah. And it would, counteract this. I was like dating, online dating with all these men like it was my job, like
Oh no.
really seriously trying to find this man to marry. and
Right, right.
and it was just never fitting. Even like, these beautiful men who one was a lawyer and very stable, had a house and like all these things was really into me. And I was like, no. Like why? Why not him? He'd be great. But
Yeah.
no, it wasn't
Yeah, in the
wasn't
back of your mind, it's like, I just gotta find the right man. Just gotta find the right man.
Mhm.
No. Mm. Okay. So what have you learned since coming out?
It's a very big question, my friend.
Yep.
How do you break that one down? Hmm. I think what I told you in the pre-interview was like that I've really come to see that coming out is a universal process in many ways. Like anyone who's growing, there's a new layer of us that we're shedding, and we have to share ourselves with the world. And so whether
Mm,
that's, someone that's getting a divorce, they have to share that with the world. And if it's I'm changing my career, or I'm quitting my job, or I'm coming out as gay, or I'm coming out as trans, like it's always this like scary thing. And yes, there's different levels of how scary that is, and I don't want to minimize people's experience and, take over this term like coming out, but I also want people to build empathy amongst each other, to know that you can understand someone better if you can look at something in your own life where you've had to come out about something, and you can have a lot more empathy for someone who's going through that coming out experience. And so that's been cool to learn and see, and it's what I've focused on in my podcast, the Coming Out Chronicles, is interviewing people to hear all kinds of coming out stories so that
okay.
we can really understand each other, and hear someone who's, yeah, maybe further along on the journey, and realize like, okay, with that coming out, there's so much life that comes. And
Okay.
it, it
So your
has been
podcast
amazing.
isn't just about LGBT coming out.
No, not only it is majority that, but there is some people coming out about domestic abuse,
Mm,
or coming out about being a sex therapist, or coming out about, all kinds of different things, because it's a growing experience, and I'm someone who's always wanting to be growing. And so, every I feel like every season I have some new coming out that I need to share with the world. And
mm.
so in some ways it's funny to me to be like, oh yeah, I'm 8 years out, but I'm like 2 minutes out in other things in my life. So um yeah, kind of this like perpetual coming out.
So you feel like that would increase compassion and understanding amongst humans if they
Hmm.
if we could all relate to this one coming out experience regardless of what we're coming out about.
Hmm. I think so.
Yeah, I feel like compassion grows anytime you recognize each other's humanity,
Hmm.
and compassion shrinks when you start seeing people as less than human.
Hmm. Yeah, just this other you
Mm-hmm.
can't understand. And why would they want to wear why would a man want to wear a dress and go read stories to children? Like this whole thing that's going on right now of, so much trans hate. And it's I think it's a matter of not understanding each other, and not even being willing to try. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's been a lot of my hope, is to help people understand how to bridge that gap, and see that there's ways that all of us are different than the norm, or what we were raised to believe. And when we can see that in each other, we can have more empathy and understanding.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me what you were saying a little bit ago about how you were afraid to even read the affirming literature when
Hmm.
you were first coming to terms with who you were. Um, I think I think some of the anti-trans people are afraid to even meet and talk to trans people because
Hmm.
at the point you open the book, like you're risking your paradigm shifting, you're risking what you believe being proven wrong, or realizing that there are different ways of seeing things, or realizing that that is another human across from you who has just as valid of a story as you do.
Yeah, and as soon as they become human,
Mm-hmm.
then it's really hard to just throw dogma. And like when you actually let yourself get to know someone, then it becomes a human. And in my experience, anyone who's like very dogmatic in the church or different things, once one of their kids comes out, or somehow it becomes personal, then their dogma and beliefs change.
Yep.
Somebody had told me when I first came out that time heals a lot of things. And in some ways it feels like a pat answer or something, but I really have seen that the relationships that feel damaged when I came out, or different things, like when some time has passed, now that I look at it 8 years back, I can see, yeah, like time has healed some things, and not pushing people to be accepting or engaging right away, but letting things happen. And there's still people in my life that I don't have anymore because I'm gay, which is sad, but I'm I'm okay with that. Like the ones that I feel really help and engage with me in my life are the ones that are affirming, and that's where I stay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's something that I learned after coming out, is that everyone is going to have a different reaction to my
Hmm.
story. And I'm not going to be able to force anyone's reaction.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to be able to force anyone to change what they think or what they believe. I can choose to still be in their lives and wait patiently to see if anything changes. Or I can choose to not be in their lives, or they might choose to not be in my life. There are a variety of things, but the last thing that I can control is what they believe and what they accept. And that's just yeah, I've seen that process of time in multiple relationships in my life since coming out, and the evolution of their thought and their belief
Hmm.
changing over the last 10 years of my journey. And I didn't do anything. I just like stuck around.
Just lived your life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. It was like if I did anything, it was passive. It was just being visible.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they realize that the person that they loved of who you are before you came out was the same person that you are now. And
Mm-hmm.
like the essence of you has not changed.
Yep. I hope they learn that. But they're not on this podcast, so I can't ask them what they've learned since I came out. Although I think that would also be interesting.
That
Like if I
would
had
be a
my
cool.
my mom on and like some of my closest friends,
Hmm.
maybe that'll be a follow-up
Maybe that will be
podcast.
a good one. Like what it's like been like for them in the last 10 years too,
Uh-huh.
because I think that's a big experience. In some of my work, I help parents of queer folks or parents of trans kids to know like how to process their own emotions and feels around it, because sometimes that it's a coming out for them too, of like how did their world change because their kid changed how they
Oh
were
yeah,
presenting the world.
totally. I bet my mom could say a lot about that.
Hmm.
Okay, so what else have you learned since you've come out that you want to talk about?
Being raised Christian, there's certain rules that we follow and certain ones that I'm okay to break from my Christian upbringing, and I'm leaning into the ways that queer folks just break all the rules in some
Mm.
ways, and like live outside of the boxes of the norms. And I was just chatting with my therapist about that this week, about like getting stuck sometimes in this is the way relationships need to happen, or this is the way things need to be. And it doesn't have to. Like, for instance, I came out and I started dating and I got married and I had kids, and I just like followed the same kind of rules that I was raised with as
Mm-hmm.
a Christian kid, and like even to the point of not wanting to live together until we were married, and
Gotcha.
even though we had sleepovers and stuff. But it was like interesting that these are these certain rules that I didn't want to do. And then, when we got to a point where we realized it wasn't working, separating. And again, like somehow it was okay in my mind to get divorced, even though my like super Christian upbringing might have said otherwise. And then now, like branching even wider into like longing for this big family
Mm.
rather than just like these tiny nuclear families that we
Mm.
all break off into. And so, like I'm exploring the ideas of like having a female partner, having a male partner, having friends that come and hang out with my kids and me, and all these people that maybe we live together, maybe we don't, and just like really living into the fullness of queer expression of life. And
Mm-hmm.
that feels really freeing and juicy and hard sometimes, but also so life-giving. And I think what so much of the world is craving, because there is so much isolation and loneliness
Yeah.
in our world. And so I think the more that we can just like bring our people together and create these like posses that
Mm-hmm.
take care of each other and interact with each other, it just feels really exciting to me and really like, okay, like let's throw all these boxes out the window, because a lot of the times they're not working for
Mm-hmm.
anyone really. And so, yeah, more and more of leaning into letting go of my constraints that I maybe was raised with and don't necessarily agree with now.
Mm-hmm.
And not to say that I reject my Christian upbringing, like, because I do appreciate that I was raised with a spirituality, and I appreciate that that was my path to spirituality. And I feel like there's like so much more and so many other ways to connect with the divine, and that feels way more vibrant and alive to me now.
Mm-hmm. The phrase queering life comes to mind,
Yeah. Yeah.
breaking out of the norms in all different areas,
Hmm.
living fully, even if it's outside of the box or the quote unquote normal.
Hmm.
What is normal?
Right, because we've already like broken through so many things to be queer, so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why not break out of the mold in
Right.
these other areas too?
I think that's why a lot of people get intimidated
Yeah.
because yeah, queers are kind of like punks. Once you break out of one stereotype or out of one like set of rules, like oftentimes they just keep going, and then it gets like too extreme for a lot of the mainstream, and they're like, no, those are the crazy people. We don't want to be like them. But it would be nice to have a good balance of queering life, like an acceptance to be able to queer life.
I want to hear, how are you queering your life?
Aha. Well, so a big dream of mine is to have like this commune, not like a
Hmm.
cult commune, but just like of this community, of this chosen family that you're talking about. And
Hmm.
living maybe not in the same house, but in the same vicinity, the same neighborhood. I mean, the same house would be like ultimate. Um, but yeah, having this family of people who are doing, their own different things, and they're loving whoever they want. Some might have kids, some might not have kids, but you're like supporting each other, and you're committed to helping each other and living life with each other and raising each other's kids. And um I just love this idea of like I feel like towns and maybe small towns used to be back in the day, where like it
Hmm.
takes a village to raise a child, but like
Yeah.
it takes a village to raise a person.
Yes. Do you have people on board with this vision with you in your vicinity?
Not yet.
No, maybe now that they're hearing this podcast,
Yeah.
maybe they'll be like, yes, I want that too.
Yep.
Because I want that, but I'm in Canada and where are you?
Well, I'm in West Virginia, but Canada seems much better a lot of the times than the US.
Well, come on over.
I have
We'll
more
start the
faith.
commune.
I have more faith in Canada being around longer than the US at this point.
Yeah, we'll see.
um, how else am I queering my life? I am trying to, I don't know, I'm trying to live into my artistic expression, which doesn't necessarily have to be queering. I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be abnormal, but I do feel like a lot of artists are kind of abnormal.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to see like life in an artistic way, or express it or interpret it or see beauty in certain things, you do have to be kind of weird. And so I'm trying to learn how to make art just for art's sake and for my sake,
Mm-hmm.
instead of also doing it for other people, instead of wanting validation from other people. So I'm trying to queer my life by just making art for me.
And is that like visual art, or I see a guitar in the background? Do you do music too?
Yeah, music, visual art. I'm trying to draw and use watercolors more, even though I'm not very good at it. I still really enjoy it, and I just love the expression of it. I just love creating. So baking, gardening, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I just have this problem with wanting validation. If I create something, I want people to love it and I want people to share it.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to not care so much about that.
My partner and I were talking about this moments before the podcast
Yeah.
about that external validation versus
Mm-hmm.
the internal validation. And
Yeah.
do you have to just get it all from inside, or is it okay to get some external validation? And that's a hard question.
Yeah. I think it's probably a mix of things, but I think I rely too much on the external validation and not enough on the internal validation.
Mm.
Okay. So, what do you wish people understood?
I wish that people understood that we used a sperm donor, not who's the dad.
Oh,
That's a question I get a lot. And I also wish that people understood that both of the children are my children, even though I only
mm,
carried one.
mm-hmm.
Um, that's been an interesting thing that I feel like heteronormative practices, would say, oh, each of you just split with one kid, but no, like they're both my children, and
Yeah.
I'm in love with both of them.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's something no one has said yet on the podcast. What else do you wish
Yeah,
people understood?
that there's not just like one person that wears the pants in the family, and
Mm,
that again, in like queering a family and a relationship, I think that a lot of people could take some notes from how queer couples do it, because it's more strengths based and just like who's good at these jobs, who's good at these jobs, who wants to take on this, and dividing the household things that way, rather than just like these are blue jobs, these are pink jobs, and
right.
um, just working to strengths.
I love that. I heard this interesting thing by Brene Brown day before yesterday. She was talking about how she and her husband show up to their partnership. And she was saying that it's never 50-50. It's never like one person is giving 50% and one person is giving, the other person is giving 50%. It's always like you try to make the couple get to 100%, but
Mm-hmm.
that might mean one person has 80% and one person has 20. One person has 40, one person has 60, one person has 75, one person has 15. And that's fine when it does equal to 100, right? That's the ideal. The problem comes when both people are less than 100, and so one
Mm-hmm.
person can't make up the difference. And so she was like, that's when you have to sit down and discuss, okay, how are we going to make sure that we are both cared for and that the things that we have to do are taken care of without hurting each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like this, I have never heard anybody talk about partnership like this. Um, and Brene Brown does a lot of revolutionary speaking about relationships, and especially the relationship
Mhm.
with yourself. But I love this idea of partnership like that, because in her
Mhm.
definition, like one person wouldn't be wearing the pants. It would totally be like one person might wear the pants one time, but the other person wears it the next time. And so it's very much a more healthy give and take of a partnership than just you do the finances because you're the boy. If you could go back to your past self, what would you say to her?
You are who you are all the time. You are who you are, and you are lovely and loved and lovable, and everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be better than you can even imagine. You can't even believe all the things that you can do, and you will do. And that feels really exciting to hear. I'm like lighting up now, just
Yeah.
hearing my old self tell my young self this in
Yeah.
my body.
Yeah. Big smile on your face.
Hmm.
Hmm. What do you think that would have changed if you had believed that, heard that, and believed it back then?
I think I would have been braver sooner,
Yeah.
and I hope it will inspire me now to be brave in the big and the hard things that I still need to do that feel too scary to do.
Yep.
But to know like everything's gonna be okay, everything's gonna work out even better than you can imagine.
Do you have a quote or song lyric that you would like to send us out on, like a benediction of sorts?
Okay, I'm gonna sing on the podcast.
Yes.
I'm headed to Brandy Carlisle this weekend, and I'm so excited. Brandy Carlisle and the Highwomen, in fact, and
Yes.
so this
Oh,
is their song,
you
which
get
will speak
all of
exactly
them.
to what we were just talking about. I want a house with a crowded table where there's room by the fire for everyone. That's my dream.
Yes. Round of applause.
Thank
That was great. Thank you so much for coming on, Nancy, and especially singing us that benediction.
you.
That was awesome.
Thanks for having me. It was fun to chat with you.
All right, to all you listeners out there, make sure to set your tables this week because we're coming over. You never know who's going
Crowded.
to show up. You never know. All right. Bye.
Bye.